right, Usman, great to have you on. Super excited for you to be on this episode. So you're quite vocal on LinkedIn about quite a few different growth strategies you've been running recently in terms of automations. Of course, it's all the craze recently with like people, unfortunately going a little bit too far sometimes, letting go of team members and trying to do as much as possible with automation as possible. So really excited to dive into your experience and different workflows you've been building, which you've also shared on LinkedIn. So if you want to give Usman a quick introduction about yourself and your experience, and then after we'll dive in from there.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for having me, Jules. So I'm an organic growth strategist. I work with B2B SaaS companies to help them make more money through search as a function, search as a channel. So that includes, of course, traditional search, Google, and then modern AI search channels like ChatGPT, Perplexity, all of these new models that are coming out. I currently lead Modash, which is an 8-figure influencer marketing startup, Series A. And I lead discoverability there, which basically, again, includes SEO, AEO. I'm building this function ground up. And on the side, I do consulting for other B2B SaaS companies. I try to share as much as possible on 2 channels right now, LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm trying to share my playbooks with as much transparency as possible. So yeah, thank you so much for having me and excited to dive into this.
Definitely. All right, so let's dive in. So there's quite a few workflows which quite a few teams could be building. And I know like ourselves, we work with quite a few different customers and we see lots of different types of workflows on the content creation front. Sometimes it's like on link vetting, sometimes it's on like cleaning listicles, etc. So what has been some workflows which you think have been very impactful, which you've been able to put in place on your side? And maybe you can describe roughly that workflow and why you think out of all the workflows you could possibly build, there's so many, this one here is actually really important and quite interesting, and you can get like a very valuable output from it.
So if you think about using automation in any of the functions, SEO, content, or anything at all, the way I think about it is you have to think about basically a ratio of impact and effort, right? So how much impact can one task drive versus how much effort or pain you have to take in order to get it done. So there would be things which you can potentially automate, but the level of effort or pain it incurs to get something done through that task is just like so minor that using automation doesn't make sense. So that's the mental model that I have currently, which is like there needs to be a high level of impact and also a high level of effort attached with something for us to think about using automation to create leverage. Now, some of the use cases where I've really found higher impact by driving efficiency through AI are, number one, a bigger bucket of content production. So at Modash, for example, very recently, we figured that we produce a lot of listicle pieces and a lot of content budget goes into creating listicle articles, which pretty much looks the same, right? We just have 2 to 3 different artifacts, 2 to 3 different categories of listicles that we produce. One are just like any other B2B SaaS company, category listicles, right? So influencer marketing platforms or X best influencer tracking software tools, stuff like that. And then on the other hand, we have competitor alternatives, but pretty much the structure stays the same. There's not a ton of uniqueness that we add intentionally into each of the piece. Of course, the content and the information is unique, but the structure itself, the overall layout, is not that unique for each of the piece. We figured that using AI would be of high impact for something like this, and we created an automation, some sort of a tool from scratch, which we now call a listicle generator. So that's like one of the area where we've actually deployed automation, and we've actually seen tangibly strong impact in terms of not just saving cost, but also scaling up the production magnitude. So for example, right now, on paper, because I actually manage the budget for the content production and everything else at Modash, I can see that we've reduced the cost of producing one listicle by about 90%. And not only that, we're also producing a lot more. So I think back in April, maybe, for example, we produced 4 listicles on top of everything else that we were already doing. And that was because the last week of April was when we had the listicle generator ready. And the next month we did 10. This month we're going to do 17, and it only goes in one direction, which is up. The good thing is we have been able to maintain the same level of quality, the same bar of quality that we had previously when the writers were writing the pieces. And in fact, we have the same exact writer. He used to write the listicles, now just editing them, and it takes only about 1 hour to do the entire thing. And it's not just something that you can get out of ChatGPT or a Claude skill. It's something that is custom built, proprietary, which includes a workflow that does deep competitor research on sites like Reddit, G2, Capterra, and then also adds semantic internal links. It also adds screenshots, not only just of the websites of the companies that we list into the listicle, but also product screenshots of Modash. So it knows as a system which features to talk about and which features have relevant screenshots to attach. And then it automatically also uploads to Webflow. The writer usually spends like 1 hour of editing, and then the entire piece is published. And you can see those pieces published on Modash. The good thing is you wouldn't even be able to notice which ones are produced by this listicle generator using automation and which ones were written by our human editor, which was exactly the goal, right? To have such a high level of quality that it's indistinguishable. So that's like one mega use case of content production. And now we're trying to expand the artifacts into other page types. And of course, then there are other things. For example, we're thinking of automating SEO and AEO reporting internally for Modash and a couple of other use cases. But again, the mental model stays the same, which is like impact and effort ratio.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So if you want to, before we dive into the other automations, I'd be very curious to dive a little bit deeper into that first one. So two parts, which I think are very interesting, maybe the most complex part of that workflow is like the information gain and the deep research side. You just mentioned like, doing a deep research into Reddit. I'm probably sure that like the micro intents, J2, the pain points, etc. Do you want to dive a little bit deeper in terms of like that deep research part? And the second part of my question would be for the internal linking workflow. How did you structure the website understanding for whoever the agent is actually doing it in terms of like the cluster, the anchor text, etc.? Like how did you instruct it basically? That'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah. The good thing about using automation is that there are just so many different ways to get to the same goal. You can achieve the same exact objective, and there are so many different routes that you can take, which is what makes it interesting. So in terms of this listicle generator, right, the piece that we have for creating listicles at scale, what we've done in terms of research is created a fallback logic. So we have a series of different sources that it pulls information from. The first source with the highest weightage is going to be the actual websites of the companies that we list into the listicle. So if it's Modash at the top and then other competitors in the list, let's say we're producing something like an influencer marketing platforms listicle and it lists about 10 different platforms. The first source is going to be the websites themselves. So the model understands that, hey, I'm going to get to the website of each of these company. Maybe it will start by, let's say, searching inside Google with a search operator, right? Trying to get to the pricing page, trying to get to the feature page. And this is the interesting part. It's not just trying to scrape the entire website because it doesn't need to, right? So for the listicle generator specifically, what that means is finding features within the actual piece by going to the different feature pages, capabilities pages, benefits pages on the product website. That's number one. Then finding, for example, pricing information on the pricing page. That's the second piece. And then third would be looking deeper into maybe help articles, support articles that are publicly available. All of this information is still on the same source, which is the website of the company itself, right? So that's the source that has the highest weightage. Underneath, we have additional sources. So we have software aggregator websites. That is where we're using G2, Capterra, Trustpilot, other kind of companies, wherever we can find reviews of actual customers about the company. So essentially what the model is trying to do is say, what are all of the software aggregator sites where any particular company has a profile on, and I can actually find customer reviews that are original. And then number third would be community websites. That's where Reddit or Quora comes into picture. That's where it's trying to find relevant threads where the company is being discussed. I think when I was trying to build this, I was chatting with my manager and he was like, hey, one thing that I really want to be baked into the listicle generator is the fact that sometimes people just share stories, right? Like, hey, I had this good experience versus bad experience using a particular product. And they're normally candid on a platform like Reddit about this kind of stuff. So we just wanted to bake that into the product, and we did that by again creating these different tiers of sources to be used, and there's a variety of different weightage assigned. So for example, for listicle generator, it knows that the ultimate source of truth is going to be the website of the company that I'm trying to scrape information off. What that means is if there's a conflict of pricing information between, let's say, the pricing page of a company versus maybe a random Reddit thread, it already knows that I have to put more weightage, significantly more weightage to the pricing page of the company itself rather than a random thread that I found on the internet. So there's basically a tier of sources that we're using for competitor research, and then there's a variety of different weightages assigned, so the model knows what to prioritize and when.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. So just like adding like a specific score to the source and saying, hey, if it's putting it from something very specific like the pricing, pull more from the website versus some Capterra thread, for example. Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. How about the internal linking? Did you guys upload, for example, your whole sitemap and then tag pages in terms of clusters and secondary keywords? Like, what was the strategy behind like the internal linking kind of like
Yeah.
model? Curiosity.
Yeah, the second part was the second question, of course, was about internal linking. The way we've solved that is, again, there are multiple ways to do this. We, as the first step, we start with scraping the sitemap so that we have an entire library of all of the pages of Modash. Now, we don't have to do that every single time a listicle generator creates a new piece, right? Because again, we can optimize it for cost. If we try to scrape the entire sitemap every single time, it's going to be just like, it will increase the cost significantly. So the way that we've operationalized that is to create a library of pages, and it scrapes the sitemap maybe once a month. And then we have a spreadsheet where it installs all of those pages that it finds to be relevant to the topic that we're producing the content for. So imagine if we're producing, let's say, a listicle on influencer marketing platforms, then it's going to intentionally only look for the topics that we've already covered around influencer marketing, and avoid other topics like affiliate marketing or maybe marketing in general or maybe other kind of random topics. So it narrows down the list of pages that we've already covered in the blog to be semantically relevant to the page that we're now producing through the listicle generator. That's number one. And then secondly, using a bunch of other keyword sources. For example, we're using the API from DataForSEO. We're trying to look at the exact keywords that are ranking for some of those existing pieces anywhere in position 5 to 15, so that we can internally link to those pages only using either directly those keywords as anchor text or a variation of them. So again, what that means is we're not just adding internal links like very randomly, we're rather trying to operationalize for better ranking positions, even for the pages that we're linking out to, right, on our blog. So essentially, there's a spreadsheet linked where it finds all of those relevant pages first and then extract all of the relevant keywords, pick one keyword per page, suggest that as an anchor text, and then finds a natural placement within the listicle automatically. So again, we're basically using it as a system to kill multiple birds with a single stone.
Yeah, 100%. It's a real shame as well. Most teams don't do their internal linking kind of like in that way, because it's kind of like a very small, easy win, but like it works really well in terms of like bringing up your anchor text and then just choosing the right page in the first place, because it kind of like makes the whole website push up a little bit. So yeah, okay, very nice workflow. It's actually very similar to how we do stuff internally at Scale as well. So pretty interesting. How about on the AEO reporting side then? So Usman, like everyone right now is trying to like, report to leadership in terms of AI search and different metrics and different tools. They all have very common, I'd say, metrics in terms of AI visibility, position rank, brand mentions, etc. What type of metrics and like mini reports are you putting together? Are you finding at least like important to kind of surface to other team members and stakeholders? Like what are you putting in your reports out of curiosity?
Yeah. So I think again, if you think about a spectrum of some sort, the things that you can automate with AI really, really well is anything that is truly objective in its nature, right? So if you have like objectivity on one end and then you have subjective items on another end, anything that is in between will be a little ambiguous, but anything that is super objective will be easier to automate. Anything that is super subjective would be hard to automate. Reporting is again one of those things which has a lot of objectivity to it, right? If there are numbers that go up, it's just good in nature. Of course, there's still like subjective elements to it where we add commentary and what to highlight, what not to highlight. But again, that is the stuff that a strategist can first ground and tell AI and guide AI on what sort of structure to follow. Once that is done, the rest of the stuff is pretty easy to automate and turn it into a system. So it's pretty easy. All you have to think about is a couple of sources from which you want to extract data. I think maybe the very first step, like step 0, the prerequisite, is going to be to think about what does an ideal reporting structure look like for my company. Let it be you working in an agency, or for example, me working in an in-house company, right? Just like being an in-house strategist. What kind of metrics are actually important to my leadership? Of course, that's a totally different discussion. We think about a structure like, hey, is it going to be traditional search traffic? Do we want to highlight traffic first, ranking second, prompt visibility, and stuff like that? The way I've done that inside Modash is the structure is pretty simple. We have 2 to 3 different sections. traditional search performance, AI search performance, and then conversions, which is basically coming from HubSpot or GA4 conversions data. So there are these 2 to 3 broad level structures within the report. Once that is done, the second thing to discuss or finalize would be the format. Do you want a presentation? Do you want a PDF? Do you want to put together a Google Doc that can be shared with the leadership? Or in our case, for example, I don't necessarily report very formally to the rest of the Modash leadership team, which actually makes it pretty fun. I just want the data to be flown to my Slack channel so I can just review it and the rest of the stakeholders can also see it. And then within Slack, we can also just ask questions here and there. So what I've done is I've put together a Slack bot, which is integrated with an automation in the backend, which is basically just extracting sources from different data sources like Google Search Console, GA4, HubSpot, and we're just blending all of them together. In fact, there's also Peec AI because now they have their MCP available. So we've also thrown that into the mix. So essentially what we're doing is pulling data from all of these different sources, blending the insights together, where AI is basically acting as an SEO specialist, just commenting on some of the high level stuff like, hey, this subfolder grew by 30%. The blog just let's say fell down in keyword rankings, or maybe the prompt visibility has taken a hit in week over week comparison or whatever, right? And according to the structure of the reports that we've already provided, it's going to drive all of those insights directly to me, or maybe a combined Slack channel. What I'm trying to in fact build now is to make that app inside Slack to be more of an agentic sort of service where we can in fact ask it questions and it can come back and just generate more insights. So it could be something like, hey, the traffic for the blog went down in June compared to the month of May. And we can literally type and ask the same bot, why did that happen? Why do you think, like, what are some of the pages that has taken the biggest hit? And it should be able to drive all of those insights based on its reasoning skills, because we're using Anthropic API essentially. So it's essentially Claude as the brain, and then it's connected with all of these different data sources, and it's using Slack as the channel to finally throw the report into. You can turn that into any sort of a format. You can create a Google Doc if you want. You can put that into PDF. In fact, like I'm very recently, I've recorded a YouTube walkthrough on how to turn presentations automatically from your SEO reports and just like create an end-to-end automation pipeline. You can use Gamma API to turn all of your reports into nice-looking presentations automatically. So if you're just using Claude Code or anything, something like that, like an AI agentic harness, you can create this entire pipeline in a matter of hours.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. I do like the idea of the weekly reports because in hindsight, we haven't yet had a chance to automate this properly because we still send them kind of like manually, where like the same way we should probably do like a quick snapshot of results and then say, hey, like what we're working on this week, etc. We do the same thing, but interesting to know you've automated because it's very similar. Like we're trying to take a mixture of like AI search results and then SEO results and put them into one. And interesting the way you see like reporting is like the same story. Like you got to have your SEO metrics, your AI search metrics, and your conversion metrics, and that's like the full picture, right? But hey, this brings us to a very interesting question, which is like all thing tooling right now in the market. So the SEO market is pretty splintered right now in terms of tooling, right? You've had like your legacy players, Ahrefs, SEMrush, which are now catching on to like AI search visibility, but you've had all these new tools come out, right? So Profound, Peec AI, and other tools. So what do you think right now is like a gap in the tooling market in terms of like, it's a shame these tools aren't offering this? Is there, I know you, for example, you built that, that mini benchmark tracker, which say, hey, this is your target benchmark in terms of sentiment, what you're trying to aim towards, and then like, trying to like work up towards that. So is there anything right now you feel there's a gap and you wish like tooling, would do this? And then after we'll dive into another question, but like, a gap in where, other tools are going to be hard to justify. Maybe we've got, some tools in the market which are a bit more expensive in terms of workflows, but like, like what can we do internally versus like where are these tools going to exist and like what they should be offering. But first of all, before we dive into that second question, like gaps in terms of like AI search visibility, is there anything you feel like right now is a bit of a gap in terms of what people have?
Yeah, I think right now, to be honest, the most commoditized space that I see is AI visibility, AI search tools. Like you literally lift up a brick, you will find an AI search visibility tool from a company. So the way I think about this is like, if you're a strategist who cares about organic growth, You have to just figure out what are different dimensions of data that I need in order to make an informed strategy. So, for example, in the past, we used to have Search Console and then a couple of keyword tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush, what have you, and that would be enough. Why? Because we are only optimizing for Google, right? At this point, we have AI search in the mix, and it's not just about prompt visibility that you need, but you also need additional insights into the coherence of your brand, how your brand is being positioned or being described by AI. And some of these features are found inside platforms like Profound and Peek, others are not. So, and that's where you can, generate some custom tools from, maybe Claude Code or Codex, whatever you're using. That's where you can actually use automation to put together something for your own self. Now, if I think about what would an ideal tech stack look like for an organic growth strategist in today's world, I would say, of course, some of the legacy tools for sure. Google Search Console is still like one of the OGs, and of course, you keep using it. GA4 stays the same as well. You need a SEO tool still in the mix. Could be SEMrush, could be Ahrefs. And then, of course, you also need an AI search visibility tool. I think Ahrefs has a brand radar tool, which is pretty good in its theory, but still, it just feels like it misses the mark in some of the areas. So in an ideal world, I would want something that is in between brand radar from Ahrefs and Profound. But right now, I'm trying to use both because they have different and unique use cases for finding optimization insights. Now, when it comes to additional tools that we currently see in the market, right, like automation building tools and all of that stuff, to be honest, my personal perspective is that the need is going down significantly for the folks who want to build things on their own. But not everyone wants to do that, right? And that's the caveat. Like, I want to build a lot of tools on my own because I want flexibility. I want to customize everything. I have more of a builder mindset, maybe. But there are a ton of enterprise companies, a lot of SEO teams who are just busy and they want compliance, they want security, they want end-to-end done for you sort of a service, and they don't want to spend time building things on their own. They just want things to be shipped because they have the budget. So in that case, I think tools like, for example, Aerops or maybe Slate or other ones can add a lot of value. At the same time, maybe tools like Claude Code can empower you if you have a bunch of MCPs and APIs to create anything that you want. So for example, the brand coherence dashboard that I speak about on LinkedIn, I've also shown that to you. That was literally a gap that I saw within, something that I simply couldn't find in any of the AI search visibility tools, which is like, hey, all of those tools are telling you how high are you ranking, what is your visibility score, what is your sentiment score, but no one is telling you how accurately is AI mentioning your brand. So if Loom calls themselves a video collaboration platform, but the entire web knows them as a screen recorder, AI will call you a screen recorder, right? But is that the positioning that you really prefer? Is that the messaging that you really want to lead with if that does not align with your company? So there isn't a tracking mechanism for that sort of a brand coherence, like positioning wise. Is AI using your language? So that is something where I just jumped in and I created something of my own. I would encourage everyone to think through the same mentality, which is, hey, what do I need in order to make an informed strategy and make strategic decisions? Do I have everything covered from the tooling that I have in the market right now? If not, let's create something new. If not, if that's not the route that you want to go into, let's just get in touch with maybe some of these companies like Aerops or Profound. Of course, it's going to cost you more money than building something of your own, but maybe you can just get that covered and save time, and you don't have to dabble with all of these, agentic tool building platforms on your own.
Yeah, 100%. It is very interesting to see the way the market is going, and definitely believe that there's a room there for those use cases for those tools. There's also room for those teams that want to build internally. Like, I think like us, we have lots of data across like multiple companies, working with like 35, 40 companies at any given time in the month. And it's like, you have a small portion, they want to go the route. So sometimes they're using these built-in tools and everything's pre-built. And other tools, they want to like, okay, collaborate internally, build the Claude workflows. And if not, use the agency that has the Claude workflows as well. So interesting to see that people are taking different kind of routes, basically. So
yeah, I think sorry to interrupt, Jules. I think one more thing that I would add here is, of course, there's the technical end where only tech savvy people can actually build things with Claude Code, for example. To be honest, I generally don't believe that. I think everyone can do it, but it's just that not everyone wants to do it, right? Which is fine. one thing that I would encourage everyone to still do is just use Claude with a bunch of MCPs. Like just add a bunch of connectors and you will literally unlock a level of efficiency and just use saving your brain power for more strategic items that you haven't seen before. So for example, I think just the other day I was using Ahrefs with Claude, but to be honest, most of my day is just spent inside Claude these days because all I have is a bunch of MCP connectors, and I don't want to use the interface of those tools. I don't want to use Site Explorer if I can just do the same thing inside Claude. But the main reason why I want to use an MCP in the first place rather than the tool directly is because it gives me a level of reasoning and filtering that I simply cannot unlock on my own. As an example, I think the other day I was doing some research, some keyword research for affiliate marketing or influencer marketing, right? Now, Modash as a company only targets topic opportunities for which brands would search, not influencers, right? So if you search for something like a keyword like how much can an influencer get paid, right? That is a topic that an influencer will search for because they want to know how much money can I make. But a brand will not search for something like that, right? They would be more interested in other variations, which is like, pricing estimates or rates of different influencers and stuff like that. So, but how do I filter out all of those keywords which are like very semantic and intent based? There are not a specific number of terms that I can exclude from a big topic lister, and it will automatically give me all of the terms that brands will search for rather than influencers under the topic of influencer marketing as a cluster. But Claude can do that reasoning level filtering, right? Because Claude can understand the intent of items in a way where I simply manually cannot extract those things for out of a 2000 list of keywords automatically. So that's where, I literally just asked Claude to do the same exact thing, just filter out all of the keywords that match this particular intent, go well with these kind of jobs to be done and stuff like that. And it literally gave me a list that was like 70-80% there. Of course, it still had some exceptions that I had to rule out. But that is like something that you would not be able to do. Now, Ahrefs is like one of the MCPs. You can combine it with many other things. Imagine you're using the MCP of Google Search Console with Screaming Frog with Ahrefs, right? All three combined with Claude's reasoning skills literally give you a junior SEO. And it doesn't take you to build something. All you have to do is attach a couple of connectors and just use Claude as you usually do within your web app. So it's amazing that how much you can do by just, using some of these very basic tools.
Yeah, no, definitely. In the team chat recently, we have like a channel where everyone's like been shipping a few like ideas of what they've been doing, and it's pretty interesting and crazy. Like even like different team members, which you would say to yourself, like maybe there's like a tech savvy barrier, but like they're starting to do stuff, and it's like wow, like you can do that pretty easily. So recently, I've seen some very cool stuff like content audits, for example, like at the speed you can move through a content audit, like in Google Sheets of Claude. So yeah, definitely some very cool stuff. So, go on. This leads us all into one question as well. So, like, going forwards then in the future, how would you kind of see, like, so you manage budgets over at Modash, for example. Tomorrow you've got a budget in terms of like SEO and AEO. Actually, I did a LinkedIn on this topic the other day, but like people are kind of like, I don't think preparing budgets very well in terms of how they see these different channels. Like, where would you kind of like allocate money in terms of like these different channels? Where would you put that money roughly? How would you see it?
To be honest, I think there is definitely some level of overlap between traditional and AI search. So my brain basically goes, we want to invest in organic growth as a whole, but then we have swim lanes for each of the different channels, right? Like there are definitely areas of overlap, but then there are also areas of uniqueness, right? Where these channels do not overlap. So the way I think about that is like, we'll keep putting money where we've seen reward in the past, which is of course organic search. We create content, we create blog content, listicles, all of that stuff. And then on the side, we want to keep pouring money into this growing channel of AI search. So, and again, the underlying thesis is that they will cross pollinate, right? Some stuff that you do for AI search, it will also benefit for traditional search. I think roughly speaking, right now, we are roughly around like perhaps 60-40 in terms of split of budget. So 60% of items of the budget, the money is going into items that are more traditional search oriented, 40% into AI search. And to be honest, when I hear a couple of people say that, hey, AI search is only like 3% of the total market of total search, I think that's just like the wrong way of looking at it, simply because that channel is not designed to send you traffic. So just thinking about it through a traffic lens just undermines its actual weightage as a marketing channel. So I think AI search is much bigger than people realize, which means you have to still pour more money than you think it deserves at this point, because it will grow larger. We can see the exponential growth, the trajectory. So what I'm trying to do is split, the budget, roughly speaking, in my mind. But again, when we put things on a spreadsheet, it still overlaps a little bit. For example, we currently have an agency that we're working with. We're trying to build this, the same exact thing that I talked about, which is brand positioning coherence, right? Hey, Modash is being talked about on the entire internet as a discovery platform for finding influencers, but we actually do end-to-end influencer management, right? That was the positioning that we had like maybe 3 to 4 years back, but the entire internet still knows Modash with the same exact phrasing. We want to fix that. We want to get in touch with those sources and say, hey, can you use this exact wording, this exact positioning, and describe Modash exactly how we prefer? So that entire campaign, one can argue it's also going to help traditional search a little bit. One can argue it's more AI search oriented. But in my mind, I'm just like splitting the budget, roughly speaking. And if you literally open up my brain, you will see that, for example, brand mentions is like, one thing where I think it's more AI search oriented. Backlinks, we're still doing them in the traditional sense, and we try to hit, normal traditional Google rankings with it. So that's roughly the split that I have. Plus, at the same time, I think generally speaking, I'm trying to keep some budget, maybe like I would say like 20%, 10%, 20%, for just experimentation, and building some of these systems where, exactly as I talked about, like listicle generator has been pretty successful, so we're trying to constantly update it. Plus, we're trying to build new systems where we're trying to create a complete pipeline of like finding opportunities, so like a content audit automation, then content assignment automation, where the briefs are created on their own, they're emailed to writers on their own, the entire content management operations can be automated up to 60-70%. And then the third part would be like actually publishing the content, reviewing the articles, all of that stuff. So all of this, efficiency gains sort of mechanisms that we're trying to build. We're also trying to pour some sort of a budget on a monthly basis. So it's like 60-40 in terms of channel split, and about 20%, generally speaking, for experimentation.
Okay, very cool. So it's good to keep some budget for experimentation. I always call them like the wacky bets, right? Sometimes. So yeah, okay, very, very nice. Well, look, that's very helpful then, Usman, in terms of how you see budgets. Have you got any last little thoughts you want to share in terms of anybody else who's kind of like and you covered a lot of stuff and you shared a lot of your internal playbooks, etc. But anything else you'd like to share in terms of like last little thoughts, like mistakes or like frames of mind you would say to anybody right now is kind of like in a similar situation maybe yourself, either in-house, managing budgets, trying to like play stuff around? Anything else you'd share? Last little thoughts.
100%. I think one thing that I would just encourage everyone to do is think of everything that they're doing on a daily basis and say, what is some of the stuff that we can delegate to a junior person? Let's say, imagine you have an intern on your team, right? Let's say today I have an intern who I can train, and I can get them to do stuff for me, which will save me a lot of time. What would be some of the processes that you would like to be taken off of your plate? And how would you put together the SOPs or the processes for that intern to take over? Of course, you would be like super clear because they're an intern, and you would like, hey, go here, do this. This is what good looks like. This is what bad looks like. Like, hey, when you're maybe doing backlink prospecting, here's the criteria for what a good website opportunity looks like for maybe brand mention or backlink. This is the objective way of defining what a good blog article looks like for Modash, right? Whatever. So you define that by breaking it down into different dimensions, different parameters. Now imagine the same exact intern is actually AI on your team. I would just say use the same exact mental framing to say, I can save a lot of time if I just delegate all of the stuff that I think is objective in nature. I can ground it in reality. I can literally build very, objective, tangible sort of mechanisms and parameters, like set rules and regulations of like, hey, this is what good looks like. And now I want to build some of these minor agents. I know LinkedIn and Twitter and everyone on social media is telling you how you can automate your entire SEO team. That's not going to happen. But it's also true that you can find some level of efficiency by creating some of these automations, which are not hard to build, to be honest. Someone on your team is already most likely dabbling with some of these tools, right? There are just enthusiasts on every team. I was that person wherever I went in all of the different companies that I joined. And even at Modash, I'm the one who is like leading with the baton in my hand, right? So I think the same thing you can do by either finding someone on your team or encouraging folks who are not yet taking the initiative to do that, and essentially just using this mindset of, hey, AI is my intern, but if I train them in 3 to 4 months with all of the markdown files and SOPs that I can build for them, all of the agentic guidelines that I can prepare for them, they will get to a point where they're essentially an SEO specialist. They might still not be able to make judgment calls, of course, because that's the strategist's role, but they can definitely give you a hand. So I would just encourage everyone to look at everything that they're doing and say, where can we add like maybe 30% efficiency? What is the stuff that we absolutely don't want to do?
I think that's an excellent frame of mind. And actually, in hindsight, like looking across some of our customers that sometimes in the past have like decided to go and automate too many roles and fire people and let people go and believe they can do more things with like AI, etc. It's they've gone a step too far and they've gone and let go of the task which belongs to the strategist versus the junior, and that's where things have gone wrong. Because in hindsight, like it's too greedy to want to believe that AI can go and do everything for you and just like it's that easy. So on the flip side, though, as you said, like removing, for example, like junior weights, let's say like simple tasks, like that's much more achievable, and also where AI is at right now in terms of like it's a great first step. Anybody who's like, okay, AI is not going to be able to do this for me, it's like that's the wrong mindset. But then after going to the point and believing, like, oh, we don't need any strategist right now, we can just have AI run the whole thing and just like one generalist marketer just do the whole show. Like, no, that's not the whole point. The whole point is like you'd have one person maintain the same quality of output, but basically be able to do a lot more, basically. And like that's where you get your bigger bang of the buck with AI. It's not a question of like, just getting rid of stuff. It's a question of like keeping who you have, but doing even more with that person, basically. So
You're absolutely right. You're totally spot on. I think it's exactly what we've done with, for example, we talked about listicles, right? We have like exponentially increased our capacity to produce blog content, cut down the cost, but we're actually spending more money, not less, on blog content, right? Because when you can do more, you want to do more if you're an ambitious company. You don't want to say like, hey, if you can save cost, let's just do that and like, just like slow down our pace. So we want to grow faster, and the best way to do that is to increase our capacity, but still keep pushing more and more.
exactly, I understand. And I can also share that, like, as someone like myself who has a ton of people costs in terms of like in an agency, I have right now we're building very actively, we're building very aggressively for AI. I've had a talk with the whole company, but like I've set the tone. The tone is this is basically about saying like, hey, this is no intent of trying to let go of anybody. The goal will be actually to move up certain junior positions into a more senior position, just above like a strategist, kind of like mid-weight role. And then after, those people can do a more interesting job because certain stuff they're doing right now is actually going to be automated to a certain degree. And then instead of having to go and hire and double our content team as we basically, go to the next kind of like revenue milestone, we'll be able to actually get there with the same team with a different output and be able to do more basically with that same output. But one also other thing which I've also said to the team is that we're not going to accept doing anything less than the quality which we're doing today. And I think that's also a problem where certain teams are getting wrong, because good people will not want to ship a bunch of slop and a bunch of mess, because people want to be proud of the work they do. And I think with certain teams are getting a little bit ridiculous in terms of expectations they're setting onto people with like AI and automations. And unfortunately, it's causing good people to maybe lower the standards of work to meet up with KPIs in terms of output. And unfortunately, good people will not want to stay around for doing work, which is kind of like, yeah, sure, I did more of it, but like it's pretty average the work I did. Like people don't want to do that. So I've set the expectation internally that like, yes, we will definitely increase our output. We will definitely be doing a lot more thanks to AI and being more efficient. But our quality standards is going to be the same as today, if not better, the same way we're doing it, fully manually and fully written. And I think, unfortunately, that's an area where lots of teams and clients are getting a little bit wrong. And some people are seeing that some good people from their team leave because they're like, do you know what? I'm not
Yeah,
taking fulfillment from doing work from all this AI stuff. So it's a bit of
absolutely.
a problem, and it's a bit of an interesting one.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's, I think you hit the nail on the head. Exactly right there.
Exactly. So interesting to see how the space is going to evolve. Usman, but like, I think we should do this discussion in a few more months. I'd be very curious to see how it goes. And yeah, so Usman, how can anybody find you and just read more about the stuff you share? I mean, you share quite a few good stuff. So yeah, feel free to let us know.
Yeah, so I am the most active on LinkedIn. That's where, like, that's my home ground. That's my where I'm playing the most. I'm throwing out a lot of content, sharing literally everything with as much transparency as possible. I have a no bullshit thesis, so I'm just trying to be as open as possible about the things that I'm doing, what's working, what's not working. And at the same time, I've recently started putting out more detailed guides of just building stuff live in front of a camera, of this automation things that we just spoken about on YouTube. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you're going to see a bunch of like 50-minute walkthroughs of me just building something live right in front of you. And just again, giving it all away for free. So like literally giving away markdown files, giving away repositories, all of that stuff without holding anything back. So yeah, so if that is of interest to you, feel free to reach out, have a chat, or just follow for the stuff that I'm putting out.
Awesome. Great stuff. Well, thanks a lot, Usman, for coming on. Super appreciated.
Appreciate it, Jules. Thank you.